Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The hallway was quiet except for the soft echo of water droplets slipping from my skin onto the polished floor. I had just stepped out of the pool, wrapped loosely in a towel, my hair still dripping down my back. The house felt empty, too still, too calm until I pushed open the bedroom door and froze. He was there. For a split second, neither of us moved. He hadn't expected me, and I certainly hadn't expected him. The air shifted instantly, thick with something unspoken. His expression flickered from surprise to something deeper, something harder to look away from. My grip on the towel tightened, suddenly aware of every inch of exposed skin, every drop of water tracing down my legs. I didn't know you were back," I said, my voice softer than I intended. He didn't answer right away. His eyes met mine, and in that brief moment, the silence grew louder than words. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something else, something warmer, heavier, pressing into the space between us. The kind of tension that made the room feel smaller. I turned slightly, as if to leave, pretending normalcy, pretending this was just an awkward accident. But my feet didn't move fast enough, and neither did his gaze. I could feel it linger, like a question neither of us dared to ask. "You're still wet," he finally said, his voice low, almost careful. The words shouldn't have meant anything. They were simple, innocent even. But the way they settled between us made my pulse quicken. I laughed lightly, trying to shake it off, trying to make it nothing. "Yeah, that's what happens when you swim." Still, neither of us looked away. He took a small step forward, then stopped, as if catching himself too late. The distance between us felt charged now, like crossing it would change something permanently. I should have walked out. I should have ended it there. But instead, I stayed. Because somehow, despite the awkwardness, despite how wrong the moment felt, there was a pull. And the most dangerous part. It didn't feel like the first time that kind of silence had found its way between us. Maybe that's why, even as I finally turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't an accident at all, and that next time, neither of us would pretend it was. I had barely made it 2 steps into the hallway when the problem made itself known. "Wait," he said, his voice sharper now, more grounded. "Your shoulder." I stopped instinctively. The towel had shifted without me noticing, loosening just enough to make me grab at it again, but not before he'd seen. Not in a way that felt invasive, just enough to notice something I hadn't. "What?" I asked, trying to steady my tone. "There's a cut. It's small, but it's bleeding." I turned slightly, attempting to glance back, but the angle made it impossible. "It's nothing. Probably scraped it on the pool edge." "It doesn't look like nothing." There was a pause. A hesitation. Then, softer, "Come here." Every instinct told me to brush it off, to keep walking, to end whatever this strange, heavy moment had become. But something in his voice, quiet, careful, made me stop. Slowly, I stepped back into the room. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward the edge of the bed. I did, clutching the towel tighter as I settled down. My heart was beating faster now, louder in my ears. He moved closer, not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate. "Hold still." His fingers hovered for a second before finally making contact, light but certain against my skin. The touch was gentle, almost clinical, but it sent a sharp awareness through me. I inhaled, a little too quickly. "Sorry," he murmured. "Does that hurt?" "A little," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant the cut. He leaned in slightly, closer than necessary, his focus fixed on the small injury. I could feel the warmth of his breath now, steady but close enough to notice. The room seemed quieter again, like the world had pressed pause around us. When his hand shifted, our fingers brushed. It was brief. Accidental. But neither of us moved right away. My breath caught. So did his. For a moment, everything stilled, his hand still near my shoulder, mine resting too close to his. The space between us felt impossibly thin now, charged in a way that didn't belong to something as simple as tending a cut. Then, almost at the same time, we both pulled back. Too quickly. "Okay, "You're fine," he said, clearing his throat, stepping away like distance might reset everything. "Right," I replied, standing up, adjusting the towel again even though it hadn't moved. Neither of us looked at each other. But the silence that followed, it felt louder than before. And neither of us seemed able to shake it. The lights went out without warning. 1 second, the house was wrapped in its usual quiet glow. The next, everything fell into darkness, so complete it felt like the walls had closed in. I froze where I stood, heart skipping at the sudden shift, listening as the hum of electricity faded into silence. "Hey," his voice cut through the dark, closer than I expected. "Are you okay?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah, just didn't expect that." Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, low and heavy, followed by the faint tapping of rain beginning against the windows. The storm must have taken the power out. Of course it did. "I think there are candles in the drawer," he said. "I know where they are." But neither of us moved. It was strange how the darkness changed things. Earlier, everything had felt avoidable, deniable. Now, standing in the same space again, with nothing but shadows and the sound of rain surrounding us, it felt like there was nowhere left to hide. Another flash of lightning briefly lit the room, and for a split second, I saw him, closer than before, his expression unreadable but intense. Then darkness swallowed us again. "I don't like storms," I admitted quietly, surprising even myself. There was a pause. Then, softer this time, "You don't have to pretend you're fine." Something in his tone broke through the wall I'd been holding up all day. "I'm not pretending," I said, but my voice wavered. "I just don't want to make it a big deal." A step closer. Careful. Measured. "It already is one," he replied. I felt him near me now, not touching, not quite, but close enough that the warmth of him reached through the cool air. My breath caught uneven as the silence stretched between us again. "Look at me," he said gently. "I can't," I whispered. But I did anyway. Another flash of lightning filled the room, and this time we didn't look away. The world outside roared, but inside, everything felt still, locked in that single moment. His hand lifted slightly, hesitating before brushing just near mine. Not quite a touch. Almost. Close enough to feel. My heart pounded, loud and insistent. The space between us felt thinner than ever, like one small movement would erase it completely. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. And yet everything was happening all at once, the pull, the heat, the undeniable gravity drawing us closer without permission. For a second, just one, it felt like we might forget everything else. But then the thunder cracked louder, sharper, breaking the moment. We both stepped back. Too fast. Too sudden. "I'll get the candles," I said, my voice unsteady. "Yeah," he replied, just as quiet. And even in the darkness, even without looking, it was obvious neither of us would sleep the same that night. I can't keep pretending this is normal. The words came out sharper than I intended, cutting straight through the fragile quiet that had settled since the storm. The candles flickered on the table between us, their soft glow doing nothing to calm the tension that had been building all night. He turned to face me fully now, his expression tightening. "Then stop pretending." "That's not what I mean," I shot back, frustration rising. "You act like none of this is happening, like we didn't feel it." "Feel what?" he challenged, stepping closer. "You're the one turning everything into something it's not." I let out a breath, shaky, overwhelmed. "Don't do that. Don't make me sound crazy." "I'm not," he said, quieter now but more intense. "I just think you're scared to admit it." "Admit what?" I demanded, even though my voice had already softened. "That this," he gestured between us, closing the distance even more, "isn't just in your head." My heart was racing now, every word pulling me tighter into the moment I had been trying to avoid. "You think I want this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think you don't want to stop it." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't still. It was charged, alive with everything we weren't saying. He was too close now. Close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the rise and fall of his breathing, slightly uneven, matching mine. I should have stepped back. I should have put space between us, drawn a line, ended whatever this was spiraling into. But I didn't move. Neither did he. Say it's nothing, he murmured, his voice low, almost unsteady. And I'll walk away. I opened my mouth. But nothing came out. Because the truth was written all over the space between us, in the way we stood there, in the way neither of us could break eye contact, in the way my pulse echoed louder with every second that passed. His hand lifted slightly, stopping just short of my arm, like he was waiting, giving me time to stop this. I didn't. My breath caught as he leaned in, slow, hesitant, like even he wasn't sure where the line was anymore. The air felt heavy, impossible to breathe, as the distance between us disappeared inch by inch. So close now. Too close. My fingers curled slightly, resisting the urge to close that final gap. His gaze dropped for just a second to my lips, then back to my eyes, searching, asking without words. Everything inside me screamed to step back. But I didn't. And just as the last inch between us was about to vanish for a moment, time seemed to hold its breath with them. That final inch, so fragile, so dangerous, disappeared not with urgency, but with quiet acceptance. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was a choice made in silence, in the way neither of them stepped back this time. His hand found hers first. Not forceful, not demanding, just there. Warm. Certain. Their fingers intertwined slowly, like learning something they had both been trying to forget. The simple contact sent a quiet wave through her, steady and undeniable. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his voice softer than it had ever been. She nodded, barely, her breath already uneven. "I think I've been sure for a while." That was all it took. The space between them shifted, not tense anymore, but heavy in a different way. Softer. Hungrier. His other hand rose, brushing lightly along her arm, hesitant at first, as if memorizing the permission in every second. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into it, her eyes closing briefly as if the moment itself had weight. Their foreheads touched before anything else. A quiet pause. Shared breath. A grounding. And then everything else followed. Not in sharp movements, but in slow surrender. Her hands moved carefully, resting against him, feeling the warmth through fabric before slipping higher, more certain. His breath deepened at the contact, a quiet exhale that said more than words could. The world beyond the room faded into nothing, the storm, the darkness, everything reduced to the rhythm they were building together. Clothes shifted, unnoticed at first. A sleeve falling. Fabric loosening. Nothing hurried, nothing forced, just the natural unraveling of distance. Each movement felt like a question, and every answer came back the same. Stay. Tell me if he started, but she shook her head gently. I will, she whispered. Just, don't stop. The words settled between them, soft but certain. What followed wasn't loud or overwhelming, it was quiet intensity. Hands learning without urgency. Breaths tingling, warming the space between their faces. The kind of closeness that made everything else feel distant, irrelevant. There was softness in it. But there was hunger too. A pull that neither of them resisted anymore. She felt it in the way he held her, not tightly, but like letting go wasn't an option. He felt it in the way she leaned closer, closing every gap that had once seemed impossible to cross. Time stretched, blurred, softened at the edges. And somewhere in the quiet, between whispered breaths and unspoken understanding, they stopped thinking about what this meant and simply let it be. Until a sudden sound from somewhere in the house. Sharp. Unexpected. They both stilled instantly. Breathing uneven. Hands still where they had found each other. Reality rushed back in all at once. And neither of them moved, not yet. The silence afterward felt different. Not heavy like before. Not tense in the same sharp, aching way. This time it was softer, but somehow more complicated. She sat at the edge of the bed, fingers lightly gripping the fabric beneath her, as if grounding herself in something real. Her breathing had slowed, but her heart hadn't quite followed. It still raced quietly, like it hadn't caught up to the stillness in the room. He stood a few steps away now, running a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. For the first time since everything shifted, he didn't seem sure of what to say. Neither did she. "I didn't think," she started, then stopped, her voice trailing off as she searched for words that didn't exist. "Yeah," he replied quietly, almost with a soft, disbelieving laugh. "Me neither." Their eyes met briefly, just a glance, but it was enough. Enough to bring everything rushing back in a single second. The warmth. The closeness. The way neither of them had wanted it to stop. She looked away first. Not out of regret, but because looking too long made it harder to pretend this hadn't changed something. "I should probably," she gestured vaguely, adjusting her sleeve, though it didn't need fixing. "Right," he nodded, but didn't move either. That was the problem. Neither of them actually wanted to leave. The room still held traces of what had just happened, in the air, in the silence, in the way they stood just a little too aware of each other now. The distance between them felt artificial, like something they were forcing for the sake of sense. "I don't think this is something we can just ignore," she admitted, softer this time. He looked at her again, more directly now. "Do you want to?" The question lingered, because the answer was obvious. And dangerous. Before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the house. Both of them froze. Another knock. Louder this time. "Hey, are you in there?" A voice called from the other side of the door. Everything shifted instantly. The air that had been warm and slow now snapped tight with urgency. Her eyes widened, and she stood quickly, stepping back as if distance alone could erase the last few minutes. He turned toward the door, then back at her, the same realization hitting them both at once. This wasn't just something between them anymore. It could be seen, heard, discovered. "Don't say anything," she whispered quickly, her voice barely steady. "I wasn't planning to," he replied, though his tone carried the same tension. The knock came again. Closer now. More insistent. And as they both stood there, too aware, too affected, and now too exposed, it became clear. Whatever this was between them, it had just become a lot harder to hide. The knock didn't stop. It echoed again, firmer this time, pulling both of them fully back into reality. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught between what had just happened and what was waiting on the other side of that door. She looked at him, really looked this time. Not with hesitation, not with confusion, but with clarity. Something had changed, and there was no undoing it. "Go," she whispered softly, though her voice carried more emotion than urgency. He didn't argue. He nodded once, steadying himself before stepping toward the door. His hand hovered over the handle for a second, just a second, before he paused and glanced back at her. That look said everything they hadn't managed to put into words. This wasn't over. Not even close. She held his gaze, her fingers tightening slightly at her sides, as if resisting the urge to close the distance again. The room still held their warmth, their breath, the quiet echo of something that had felt inevitable. And maybe it was. He opened the door just enough to respond, his voice controlled, casual, almost too casual. The conversation outside blurred into the background, distant and unimportant compared to the storm still lingering inside her chest. She took that moment to breathe, to think. But every thought led back to the same place. To him. To the way everything had shifted so naturally, so dangerously, like it had been waiting for the right moment all along. When he finally closed the door again, the house fell quiet once more. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was decided. Neither of them spoke right away. They didn't need to. He stepped closer, slower now, giving her time, giving her space to choose. She didn't step back. That was her answer. The distance between them disappeared again, but this time, it felt different. Not rushed. Not accidental. Intentional. Her hand found his first, like before, but steadier now, more certain. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and grounding, like something real in the middle of everything uncertain. "Are we really doing this?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him, her expression soft but unwavering. "I think we already did." A small, breathless smile passed between them, equal parts disbelief and acceptance. And as they leaned into that closeness again, slower this time, more aware of everything it meant, the world outside the room felt distant, irrelevant. Because whatever this was, unexpected, complicated, impossible to explain, it was also undeniable. And neither of them wanted to walk away.